Hello everybody and welcome back to Double Play Baseball. In this video, Ryan and I are finally going over our 2023 MLB season predictions. We just finished up our series in which we previewed every single team season, but now we're talking about different things like record predictions, who's going to the playoffs, who's winning the World Series. It's the most fun video of the entire year, maybe outside of the World Series preview, but it's one Ryan and I have been looking for the entire offseason, and it pretty much marks the end of the offseason because opening day is just a couple days away. Ryan, I'm so excited to get into this episode with you.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. I'm ready, excited to jump right into this. Let's go ahead and start off with the AL East. I'm going to go ahead and start off. I've got a new division winner in the AL East. Despite the Yankees, they got the 2 seed last year in the American League. I got the Blue Jays win the division at 95 and 67. I was on them last year too. I had them winning the division last year. They didn't do it. Putting all my face there again. The Yankees go in second place, 2 games back, 93 and 69. The Rays at 82 and 80, and then the Orioles at 80 and 82. And then I said this in the Red Sox prediction video. I'm going the Red Sox, losing 90 games, 71 and 91 at the bottom of that division.
It's certainly bold, and this is a division we were pretty wrong on last year. I'll just give my picks. We're relatively close, but on records at least, but I've got different positioning inside the division. I have the Yankees still on top of the AL East at 96 and 66. I knocked a couple wins off because of some injuries they've had so far, but as we said in our season preview, I still believe in the Yankees over a full season more than I do the Blue Jays, but I have the Blue Jays really close. I have them at 93 and 69, so my Blue Jays record is your Yankees record. Those two for me, though, are the interchangeable top 2 in the division. And then for me, I also have the Rays with the exact same record at 82 and 80. Still think they're an above 500 team. I think it'd be kind of hard to predict them going below 500 after the last couple of years in the franchise. And then I've got a different 4 and 5. I do have the Red Sox finishing 4th. I think I hinted at this in the Orioles preview that I have the Orioles coming in 5th, but both teams got below 500. I have the Red Sox 78 and 84 and the Orioles 75 and 87. So both of those teams are close, but I think they're definitely the 2 worst teams.
I kind of disagree there. I was kind of going back and forth. I was going between Rays and Orioles. I ended up giving the kind of benefit of the doubt to the Rays, who have been there a while. But I was in the Orioles at third in that division and in the playoffs for a while. But yeah, I ended up going Rays as second at 82 and 80 and Orioles at 80 and 82.
I want to hear why you do have the Blue Jays above the Yankees, though, because that's one of the places that we differ. Like, what pushed them over the top for you?
It was the lineup this year, and we kind of know what they were. We talked about that in the Blue Jays video. They were righty heavy last year, and they were solid. The lineup was good, and the pitching rotation is kind of similar. They had Bassett to be a 3, add a little bit stability, and because Brios did not bring stability, so I think you get a little bit more consistency in the rotation. The lineup addressed its needs, getting Dalton Varsho, Kevin Kiermaier, Brandon Belt. You had some lefties into that order. I kind of like that in a righty heavy offense, and they weren't too far behind. If it weren't for the Yankees being on historic pace in kind of the first half of the season, they slowed down a little bit, and I didn't have it right down. I could go back real quick to see what the Blue Jays ended up with 92 wins and the Yankees at 99. So they were 7 games back despite that insane kind of pace that the Yankees were on. And I think the Blue Jays get better. Yankees probably get a little bit better too. We talked about that. Lineup's kind of the same. They get Rodon. I literally had them. They were 1 game apart this entire time. They're at 2 now. I bumped them down a couple because of the injuries they went through, like you mentioned. So I kind of just like the Blue Jays lineup, that improved lineup and stability of the rotation. Whereas Yankees, they're getting a little hurt and some question marks around what can Josh Donaldson be. We thought he was going to be good last year. He wasn't. Aaron Boone believes him. I don't know if you saw that interview.
I did.
Volpe, if he can break out. So there's some question marks. The Judge, he's obviously not going to hit 62 home runs again, we don't think. So I just kind of like what the Blue Jays have a little bit more on paper.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I still think that the Yankees over a full season have the pedigree to get the job done. Now, I think the Blue Jays are going to be right on their tail the whole time, and they're definitely, I think, the more high upside team. But for some reason, I believe the Yankees are safer, and they've been there before. So if it was coming down to the wire in the division race, I have a little bit more trust in the Yankees. And they still have, they've got the best player. They've got, I would argue that Rodon and Cole are both better than the 1 and 2 for the Blue Jays, which is either Gausman or Manoah, whichever way that you want to slice it. I think the Yankees win that have the upper hand there. And I just like the rest of the rotation a little bit more as well. So I went with the Yankees as the division winner. Why don't you start us off with your 1 through 5 in the AL Central?
Let's go with the Guardians at number 1. I've got them running back at the top of the division at 90-72. So one of the weaker divisions baseball. 90 wins does it for them. White Sox in second at 83-79. The Twins right there in the third at 81-81. The Royals, they improved a little bit from last year. They're going to get 4th instead of 5th this year at 71-91. And then the Tigers at 66-96 to round it out in that division.
I think we knew coming in this is going to be the division that we had the biggest difference. I said it in our Twins preview. I think the Twins are winning the division, and I know it's bold, but I don't have them, too much better than you did. I've got the Twins finishing at 88-74 and winning the division. I've got the Guardians just 2 games behind them at 86-76. I don't like the White Sox this year, as I mentioned in their team preview. I've got them finishing below 500 at 80-82. I think they kind of sell off some pieces at the deadline, and I'm just still not sure what to make of that team. And I'd rather be too low on them than too high like I've been in past years. I have the Royals with the exact same record at 71-91, and the Tigers, I've got them 1 game worse. Still on the bottom, though, at 65-97. So, I mean, I guess we start by talking about the fact that I've got the Twins winning the division. You have them in third. You're that low on Minnesota?
Yeah, I mean, it's just the roster feels so similar to last year. And talked about that. If they're going to be as good as you think they will be, it's going to be the health. They do improve Pablo Lopez. They lose the batting champ in Arise. I'm just not as high on Pablo Lopez as I think you are and other people are. Other people might be. So I think that's just a very similar lineup or just team in general. And Twins, I mean, they've got potential if they stay healthy, if Correa can stay healthy. Obviously, we say it every year about Buxton. If he's healthy, he's an MVP candidate. He doesn't even need to play a full 162 to put up numbers like that. So that's really what it's going to come down to for the Twins. And I just don't know if I'm going to put my faith in a team's health when they've struggled so mightily, like kind of consistently for years. And with Correa question marks, he was hurt last year. Then obviously the whole debacle with the physical, we have no clue what that's going to mean. And obviously with the White Sox kind of moving on to them, if you guys watched last year, I had them winning 100 games, the 1 seed. So not quite winning 100 games this year, but still belief in them to get second, 2 games over the Twins.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the argument that you had about the Twins you can use for the White Sox. Like, they're not a team that's been particularly healthy. The defense isn't great. They didn't improve, I would argue, from last year. So I think you make that same argument. I think the Twins, I feel like their lineup is a little bit better. Another year for some of these guys in it as well, like Jose Miranda, some of these other young guys. And you get Correa back, and you should hopefully have him for a little bit more this year. Buxton, always a toss-up. But then the rotation, I really like the rotation. I kind of think it's the best rotation in the division, 1 through 5. I like what the Guardians have at the top, but being able to have Pablo Lopez, who I think is still an all-star caliber arm. The Mets really roughed him up last year, but other than that, he was great against everyone else. And then you've got a bunch of other guys. Like, you have Joe Ryan, you have Tyler Mahle, you still have Kenta Maeda, Sonny Gray. I like the 1 through 5. I think they just need a lefty. But I do believe in the Twins a lot. And the Guardians, we're going to get to our playoff seeds later, but they're going to be right on the fringe, at least for me. And I still think 86-76 is a respectable record. I don't know if you'd agree.
Yeah, I mean, when you break it down record-wise, only had them 4 games better. It was enough to win the division for me. But with the Twins, they only had 78 wins last year. So you're saying they're getting 10 wins better. I don't know if they got that much better, if at all. So, I mean, 81-81, still improvement from last year. And I think there's too many question marks and a piece away from me in that division. And White Sox, I believe they ended up going 81-81 last year. I feel like they're always around 81-81. Yeah, they were. So I think a couple games better for them is what I have them as well. So not too crazy. And when we talk about awards, which I guess will be out tomorrow, I've got a couple of awards for the White Sox players as well. So tune in then. And then, so I think they're going to see some improvements from some players on their team, but stay tuned for if it's enough to make the playoffs.
Let's get to the AL West. I'll start it off with the Astros at 101-61, the only 100-win team, in my opinion, in the American League. Then I have the Mariners right behind them, still in second place, but a very good record. I have them at 93-69, so same record that I have the Blue Jays at. I've got the Rangers at 78-84, the Angels 75-87, and the A's 57-105. They're the only 100-game loser in the American League.
So I know we said we're not going to do this, but I'm going to reveal a playoff seed here because it was my biggest switch up over what we've been talking about for a long time, and my biggest surprise in this whole thing. Coming in first, I was 1 game ahead on the Astros, 102-60. Second is the Mariners at 94-68. And third in the division, my third wild card team, I'm going with the Angels at 85-77.
Wow.
I've been saying this all offseason, I'm not going to put my faith in the Angels, but something just clicked for me, and it's something switched. It just feels like the Angels are making the playoffs this year. I think, as silly as it sounds, the World Baseball Classic, getting Shohei and Trout kind of a taste of a playoff environment, I think that's going to motivate them. And we talked about that in their preview. They did improve their team as well. So it's not just they're more hungry than ever, but I think they're going to kind of have a chip on their shoulder. With Shohei being a contract year, I could see he's putting up a monster year. If Trout stays healthy, he could be even monster than before, trying to keep Shohei. And with the other players, I think that they're going to be in the wild card for me. The Rangers are 4 games behind that at 81-81, and then the A's at 52-110, being by far the worst team in baseball for me. But that's my AL West. I mean, the Angels and Rangers were the only ones we deferred on seeding-wise in this division. So I know we've talked about the Rangers a lot. We had that video with Donnie Eckert, their bench coach, that you can go check out. But me, I'm hoping for some Rangers fun. Being here at TCU, I would love to see that. But I guess you can kind of grill me a little bit for the Angels pick.
No, so here's the thing. Like, I think that the Angels, if they have the guys that they have for a full season, are probably a 500 or better team. The question is the health. What are you going to get from Anthony Rendon? What are you getting from Mike Trout? You really don't know. Some of these starting pitchers, too, like, I really wonder whether you're going to get the same Tyler Anderson that you had this year as you had last year. And I still have that. I know it might be a weird thing for some people, but the fact that their rotation is entirely left-handed except for Shohei Ohtani, I think that's a bad, like, I do not like that move going in to the season because, lineups are primarily right-handed, and I think they can get hit around in a couple series, especially when Shohei isn't pitching. The bullpen didn't get much better for me, but the big question was, what if Mike Trout goes down? What if Shohei Ohtani gets traded? I think that is a real legitimate possibility at the trade deadline. And then you're also banking on other players like Rendon to stay healthy, like a Jared Walsh to bounce back. There were just a lot of question marks for me, so I honestly went in with the assumption that either Trout's going to get hurt at some point or Ohtani's going to be traded. And at that point, I don't think they're more than a 75-win team. The Rangers, I know that they have some question marks as well, but I do want to believe it in the Rangers. And I honestly think I like their roster a little bit more, especially if Shohei is traded at the deadline. I do think they're the better team. So they were really close. They're interchangeable for me at 3 and 4, but I don't really see either of them being above 500 this year. The Angels probably have the better chance, but I also think that they have another chance to kind of just fold like they did last year. And I don't know why I can't shake the idea that I think that Ohtani's going to be traded, and I'd rather be on the conservative side of their record than too high on them like I have been in past years.
Well, you figure if Ohtani's traded, they're going to be a lot worse than what I'm projecting. If they even have a chance to make the playoffs, there is no way they let him go, especially because it's a contract year that I'm sure they definitely want to re-sign him. If they trade him, the record will have to be abysmal, and they'll have to have a sense that there's not a chance he's re-signing with them. So I feel like stuff has got to go a lot wrong to get Shohei traded, and I feel like it's not. They might trade him, so they might miss the playoffs. If there's a chance they're in the playoffs, he's not getting traded. And then there was one other thing I was going to say. You got to remember, like, they were also on fire to start the season. The first month or two, we said, oh, okay, the Angels, okay, but what if they can win the division? And then they just went on a horrible stretch. So if they're also not as streaky, which kind of teams aren't usually that streaky year to year, if they can just maintain not winning the division pace, but just be solid like they can be, like the roster is kind of built to, I think you can see them in the playoff discussion. And just in general, I think the AL third wild card's a little weak, so that's where they get the chance to get in. They're not better than they wouldn't even be close. They'd be almost they'd be 8 games back if this was a two-team wild card. So I think they can get the third wild card, but that's not to say they're going to be one of the better teams in the American League.
Yeah, that's why I think my record is in between the Shohei trade scenario and the best case scenario making the playoffs. Like I can't come out here and predict they're gonna lose 100 games. Like I can't predict an abysmal scenario because I have to factor in the idea that they could be pretty good. So I went with my record kind of right in the middle of here's the abysmal scenario, here's the best case playoff scenario, 75 and 87 somewhere in the middle of that. So I mean, we both had the A's under 100 or over 100 losses. I didn't go as far as 110 games, but I mean, I can see it. Was there any thought for you that the Mariners could pass the Astros, or should we just move to the NL?
Not really. I think and I don't even want to say that the Mariners are like a year or two away, just because the Astros have so much young talent. I mean, their core is kind of beginning to age out. They're kind of entering that. They lost Correa, lost Springer now, lost Gurriel now, but you still have Bregman and Altuve for that core, and they're still performing at a high level. And then you're also getting Jordan and Kyle Tucker and just Jose Abreu you sign now to get better. You got some young pitchers. It's just I feel like the Astros are going to kind of run that division for a little bit longer, but the Mariners are going to be like perennial. If you pieced it together, I've got them as the 1 seed in the wild card. So I kind of feel like they're going to be there for a while. Maybe you see them get the division 1 year if things go your way. But I think it's still the Astros. There wasn't really much thought behind it.
Yeah, let's move to the National League, and we'll start in the East again. And as much as I wanted to back up my prediction that I had last year that the Mets would win the division, I do think the Braves are still probably a better regular season roster at least, and with the Edwin Diaz injury, I had to knock a couple wins off for the Mets. I originally had both these teams winning 100 games. Now I just have the Braves winning 100 at 102 and 60, which is better than any record that I had anyone in the American League. I've got the Mets at 97 and 65, the Phillies 87 and 75, and then the Marlins and the Nationals. I've got the Marlins winning 72 games with 90 losses. The Nationals, I have the worst record in baseball, like I predicted in our season predictions, with a 54 and 108 record.
Yeah, so with the Braves, I was pretty similar. I had 101 and 61 winning the division. Once again, that's the same record they had last year. Mets, I had them 1 or 2 games behind, also took a couple of losses for injuries. They're 96 and 66. Phillies at 88 and 74, so they get better from last year, I believe, as well. Marlins had a couple games higher at 77 and 85, and then the Nationals, not quite the worst record because that goes to the A's, but I've got them at 58 and 104 at the bottom of that NL East division.
Yeah, this is our most similar division so far. So, I mean, we can go to the top. I think that, these are two teams that everyone kind of knows is going to make the playoffs, and it's just a matter of, well, who's going to be one of the top wildcard teams and who's maybe even going to be the 1 seed in the National League. Again, was it a foregone conclusion for you that the Braves were going to be the division champs?
It was, and I think it came down to kind of what we'll see a little bit later is, let me see you take it from me. It's kind of how you were conservative on some other teams. This is kind of where I was, I guess you could say, conservative. Had the Braves all year last year, and they still won it. And it came down to the final weekend, but they won it. I was still right. So it's one of the things. I was within 1 or 2 games kind of the whole time when I was making record predictions. Ended up having the Mets finish 5 games back, which is still a tight division race to the end, winning 96 games. So it was kind of one of those things. I'm probably going to pick the Braves until I see them lose it.
Yeah, let's move to the Central. I'll let you go first this time. I think it's no secret the Central divisions in both leagues are the lowest, or I guess the worst of all 6. But what did you have the Central, and how did it shake out for you?
So I've got the Cardinals winning that division once again at 91 and 71. Brewers coming at second at 82 and 80. Cubs a few games back there at 77 and 85. Pirates coming in at third at 70 and 92. And then finally the Reds at 63 and 99. Just avoid losing 100 games.
Well, I spoke too soon on the National League East because this is our closest division. I also have the Cardinals winning at 91 and 71, so same record. I have 1 game worse on the Brewers at 81 and 81. I think they're just a 500 team right now. Not exactly sure what to make of the Brewers. Weird offseason for me. The Cubs, a 77 and 85 record. I'm a little lower on the Pirates because there's some teams I give the benefit of the doubt to, some teams I don't, kind of like you were talking about, like a prove me wrong. I've got them finishing at 66 and 96, so not all that much worse. And then I've got the Reds 60 and 102.
Okay, so it's pretty similar. Not much to talk about there. I guess with the Brewers, the question mark is, could they compete for a wild card spot? It's kind of looking like, I think we both have no here. But the question mark is, do they blow it up? How long do they hold on to this team, recognizing that kind of the Dodgers and Padres, Braves, Mets, and even the Phillies are kind of seem like they're here to stay, and Brewers might be on the way out. Do they blow it up at this point? Maybe trade Adames, Burns, both, even maybe some more pieces.
Yeah, I mean, I think they do. I think that was one of my bold predictions, is they do trade. I want to make an adjustment to my Pirates record, because I said good things about them in our season preview, and I have a team I also want to take a couple wins away from. So I'm gonna up my prediction by 2. I'm gonna say Pirates are 68, and what would that be, 94, just to even things out, and you'll see why later. But the question I would ask is, are the Cardinals the safest in the entire MLB when it comes to winning the division? Like, are they the biggest lock when it comes to winning their respective division? I think my answer would be yes.
I mean, yeah, I would say so. I think the Astros are probably close for me, and maybe even the Guardians. I know we differ on that, but I think the Guardians are pretty safe to win the division. But Cardinals, I think, are definitely up there, even though they're only going to win 91 games for both of us, which is kind of weird to say that they're the biggest lock, only winning 91 games. So I think the Brewers can do it. I was actually picked the Brewers. We both picked the Brewers last year. I was going back and checking that out. So I think the Brewers, if everything goes right, their best case scenario, and the Cardinals one of their worst case scenarios, it's possible for the Brewers. So it's not 100% lock, but I think it's as close to maybe as close to one as we can see in any division.
Yeah, funny enough for me, the Cardinals with 91 wins would only be better than a third place team in one other division, and that's the AL Central. Like, they would come in, they would win the AL Central for me, but I'd have them, they'd be a third place team in both AL in the NL East and the AL in the NL West, which is kind of crazy, but take advantage of it while you can. I do think it's a pretty safe, though. Cardinals, I do think they've locked up that division before the season started. Of course, there's some teams that could push them. Nothing's a guarantee in the majors, but if I had to go put money, I think they're the safest bet to win their respective division. In the NL West, a little bit of a power shakeup record-wise, but I'm not seeing too much of a change when it comes to the standings. I do have the Dodgers staying atop the NL West at 162, so a big drop-off record-wise for Los Angeles, but still do think they win the division, still do think they win 100 games. I've got the Padres still in second over a 162-game stretch. I don't think they threaten the Dodgers enough yet, but they do finish at 95 and 67, so a really good season for San Diego. My Giants I have at 85 and 79. The D-backs I have 79 and 83, so creeping up closer to 500. And the Rockies, they're the team I wanted to take 2 wins away from, because I predicted that they would have 100 losses in our season preview, but I didn't give them 100 losses here, and I want to adjust that, so I'm going to drop them to 62 and 100.
So I'm right there at the top. I've got the Dodgers winning, but only 95 games. I've got them at 95 and 67 winning that division.
They won how many last year?
111, but
you think they're losing 16 more games? Wow, that's a lot.
I think so. And I mean, they overperformed, as good as the Teddish had last year. They overperformed and got worse with injuries, losing Trey Turner, a couple other key players that they've had for so long, like Justin Turner, Cody Bellinger. Padres only 1 game back at 94 and 68. I ended up giving it to you. I ended up going the Giants in third place, only about 1 game, 78 and 84, and then the D-backs at 77 and 85, and then the Rockies, I was even a little lower than you were, at 57 and 105 to round out the NL West.
Yeah, the Rockies they've never lost 100 games ever, and you can always manufacture offense at Coors Field. But my bold prediction for the season was they'd lose 100 games for the first time ever, and I needed to make that true today, which is why I took a couple games away. I guess we start, because we got the same standings. I would say this is your most entertaining divisional race, the Dodgers and the Padres. As a Dodgers fan too, how much did you have to think about this one? Or did you think that it wasn't going to be Dodgers the whole way? It just was going to be close?
No, it wasn't the Dodgers the whole way for me. And this is kind of the same scenario. Like, everything in me kind of wants to pick the Padres, as crazy as that sounds, and especially considering the decor behind me. Everything in me wants to pick the Padres to win this, but this is the same thing as the Braves, and even more so with the Dodgers. This is come and take it. And they did in the playoffs last year. They beat the Dodgers. And I think the Padres might have the better team on paper, but it's another thing where I'm not picking the Padres until I'm proved wrong. And even if the Padres go and win, I was like, oh, I only had them one game behind. So I get a little bit of a cop-out as well. But I think for prediction-wise, I have to go to the Dodgers just because I need to see the Padres do it before I pick them. And so that was kind of where I was in my thought process with that. I think the Padres more than have the ammo to do it. It's just, will they?
Yeah, for me, the question comes down to just a full 162 game season because they struck gold by beating the Dodgers in the playoffs, but that's kind of like lightning in a bottle. You only need to win a couple games. They showed over the entire regular season the Dodgers were a far better team, and the Dodgers dominated the Padres in head-to-head matchups over the regular season. And so when it comes down to it, I think they're a slightly weaker starting rotation, and I've got questions about the depth, especially if someone goes down to injury, and they've already seen Joe Musgrove had to miss a little bit of time. I do think the Dodgers bullpen is still better. Neither of us like Dave Roberts, but the Dodgers have that pedigree, and at least they know how to win in the regular season. Like, even if they haven't figured it out in the postseason the last couple of years, they win regular season games, and they win a lot of them. So I still give them a benefit of the doubt that they're going to win 100 games. Same thing for the division, but I do really think that the Padres, I think they're the better roster. You could even give them, the upper hand in a playoff matchup, and I wouldn't be surprised, and I probably wouldn't disagree with you. I like this Padres roster. Maybe if they had Fernando Tatis Jr. for the entire season, and you wrote me a guarantee saying he's going to play for the entire year, then I could maybe have them beating the Dodgers, but there's a little bit more question marks, at least for me, for the Padres. I think they're lower floor, higher ceiling kind of team, but I'm giving the Dodgers the benefit of the doubt for one more year, no matter how much it pains me. That's what I'll say.
And then we defer on the Giants as well. I don't know if you want to talk about that as well at all before we get into the wild card. We've had lengthy discussions about this off camera, but
I have made my points very clear that they were an 81-81 team last year in what was like a worst case scenario season. They were so bad. They were the worst team in baseball for multiple months, and they still finished at 500, and they got better in the offseason. I don't think you can disagree with me there. And they're still a couple seasons removed from an 107 win season. So I don't think they're they didn't get worse. I don't think you can put them below 500, but to get into the playoffs, I still don't have them as a playoff team, and that pained me. I did not put the Giants in the playoffs. I did last year. I know I didn't have them winning the NL West. I did have them. I still think finishing either. I don't remember whether I had them in front of the Padres or behind the Padres, but I did not have the Giants in the playoffs this year. I've got them the first team out, and them and the Brewers are the only two teams 500 or better to not make the playoffs for me, which means that it shakes out in my NL as the Braves is the 1 seed, the Dodgers is the 2 seed, and the Cardinals as the 3 seed. So the Dodgers have been the 1 seed. Last year, the Giants were the 1 seed in 2021, but the Braves back on top of the NL. And then the 3 wildcard teams in order, I've got the Mets, the Padres, and the Phillies.
Yeah, I've got the same thing right there. Kind of the same teams in the playoffs. We defer from last season, going Braves 1, Dodgers 2, rather than Dodgers 1, Braves 2, which it was last year. And it sets up a rematch of the wild card series. Should we go ahead and start that one off before getting into the American League?
No, so you have the exact same playoff seeding as I do?
Correct.
Okay, let's go to the AL. Let's say our seeds and then go through the wild card matchups because they all happen at the same time. For me, I think if you've been listening, you can try and deduct from our records what I have. I have the Astros as the 1 seed, the only team winning over 100 games in the American League. I still have the Yankees as the 2. I do think those are still the 2 best teams in the American League. And I think especially when it comes to the playoffs, they will be the 2 highest seed. I've got the Twins winning the AL Central. They're the 3rd seed. And then my playoff shakeout, Blue Jays and Mariners had the same record. I wasn't exactly sure how to work that one, but I ended up going the Blue Jays as the higher seed. The Mariners are the 5. And my 6th seed in the final wild card team, I still managed to find a spot for the Cleveland Guardians and in the playoffs. So Guardians fans, you don't have to come at me with the pitchforks and everything. I still have them making the playoffs, so don't complain too much. And then the teams missing out for me, just on the outside looking in, were the Rays at 82-80 didn't sneak in, the White Sox 80-82 didn't get in, and then a collection of Rangers and Red Sox at 78-84 wins that didn't quite make it.
I've got the Astros as the 1 seed as well. They won 102 games, which is the only 100-win team in the American League. Blue Jays as the 2 seed. Like I said, I've got them winning that division. Guardians still at the 3 again. And then the top wild card was the Mariners. That was my bold prediction for them. They were 1 game better than the Yankees, who will play them in the playoffs. And then the Angels were the final wild card team, and they're going to be playing the Guardians in this matchup.
That sets up some interesting wild cards. So, there's 4 wild card matchups, 2 in each division. Mine are the Twins versus the Guardians. So right off the bat, you get a division matchup. The other one is another rematch. It doesn't really matter where I went seeding wise. It's the Blue Jays versus the Mariners either way. And then in the NL, I've got Cardinals versus Phillies rematch and Mets versus Padres rematch because it's the same layout as last year. What are your overall matchups before we give our picks?
I've got the same rematches in the NL wild card, and then the AL wild card. The Guardians are going to play the Angels, and then the Yankees versus the Mariners.
All right, let's go where we're the same, which is the National League. Cardinals, Phillies, Mets, Padres. Last year it was the Phillies that won and the Padres that beat the Mets. What did you go with this year?
I'm once again picking the Phillies to beat the Cardinals. It's going to be in St. Louis again. Basically the same thing. Actually, both of these are the same thing in terms of where they're playing them. 3 games at the better team. Phillies are going to go over the Cardinals, and they'll move on to play. I think it's the Dodgers. That's how it works. They play the 2 seed because they played the Braves last year with the 2 seed. And then the Mets versus the Padres, another rematch where I think the Padres swept that to go play the Dodgers. But I've got the Mets winning this time around with Verlander and Scherzer at the top. I know they beat Verlander or Scherzer and DeGrom last time, but I'm going with the Mets this time, and then they're going to go on to play the Braves, which will be a fun 7-game, or I guess 5-game series.
I really wanted to let the Cardinals go on a little bit of a mini, I guess I would call it like a playoff run, because I do think they're a very talented team, and I think they would have gone on a run in the American League in my bracket, but the National League is just so stacked, and I just still have reservations about their pitching. I also have the Phillies, the 6th seed again, upsetting the Cardinals in St. Louis. It's just, you got Nola and Wheeler at the top. Bryce Harper will be back at this point. Unfortunately, no Rhys Hoskins for them, which was he was a big deal in their playoff run. Hoping for a speedy recovery for Rhys. But I've got the Phillies with another 6 seed upset, so they move on just like you to face the Dodgers in the next round. And then I'm also going with the Mets. Padres fans, I think they're going to be upset with us because the Padres are a very trendy World Series pick for a lot of people. And we both don't have them winning the NL West. It's hard to see these teams only get to play a couple wild card games, but the National League is so good. I went with the Mets. I do think that it's the Verlander and Scherzer at the top. I really like their lineup, and I think they have the better bullpen. And talking with Giraffe Nick Mark about the depth on their roster, I'm really believing in the Mets at least to beat the Padres, so they will play the Braves as well. What did you go with in the American League?
In the American League, I'll start with the Yankees versus the Mariners. Another tough one, but it boils down to I like Rodon and Cole at the top. I'm going the Yankees to go face their daddy in the Astros in the division series in Houston to start. And then the Guardians versus Angels. This would be kind of a fun one because, you get Bieber and McKenzie versus Ohtani, and then I guess whoever's pitching well for the Angels will get the 2-game at the time. Don't tell me crazy, but the Angels are winning that, I think. They both have good pitching at the top of it, and we saw in the wild card last year, even though the Guardians won, their offense was non-existent, and they only beat the Rays because their offense was also non-existent. And
maybe why they're not winning the division this year.
And I don't think that would happen with the Angels. I think the Angels would go ahead and win that. I think it would take 3 games, which would that be our... Did we have a 3-game wild card series last year? No, I don't think so.
I don't believe so.
I think it would take 3 games, but I'd go with the Angels to go face the Blue Jays in the division series.
For me, I have Twins and Guardians. That's the 3-6 matchup, and Blue Jays Mariners is the 4-5. I'll start with the Blue Jays Mariners. I've got a revenge tour for the Blue Jays. I think this is the year that they do beat the Mariners. And the 2 5 seeds for me, the Mariners and the Padres, get knocked out first round. It does suck, but that's just the way the playoffs look right now. So I've got the Blue Jays moving on. They will face the 1 seed, the Astros. So we get a new matchup in the divisional, which will be fun. And then I've got Twins and Guardians. This is the one I thought about for the longest time. I think this is a 3-game series. But if I pick the Twins to win the division, I'm going to pick them to beat the Guardians in the wild card round as well. I think the argument that you made for the Guardians that they just didn't hit in the playoffs last year, I think that it's a series where I think that I would just pick the Twins, and Carlos Correa was honestly the difference maker for me. He's the best postseason hitter that would be in that matchup. He has proven it year in, year out that he just hits in the big moments in the postseason, and so this one was kind of right on the razor's edge, and I ended up going with the Twins. So for me, the divisional matchups are Astros, Blue Jays, Yankees, Twins, Braves, Mets, Dodgers, Phillies.
Yeah, I got the same in the NL. That's where we can start. But then I've got Astros versus Yankees, and then Blue Jays versus Angels. Starting in the National League, Braves versus Mets. That'd be a fun one. But I said with the Braves, I think they're going to go to the World Series, and I'm sticking with that. I think the Braves are going to beat the Mets. Same thing. They beat them out in the division. I think the Braves are going to win this one. I just like kind of almost all aspects of their team a little bit more. Their lineup is probably the second best in baseball, behind maybe just the Astros. That starting pitching rotation, I mentioned with the Mets are going to be either the best or worst case scenario is the worst. So they've got a high floor, high ceiling, low floor for them. So I have to see where it comes around playoff time, but for now I'm going to rock with the Braves to move on. And then the Dodgers versus the Phillies. I've been pretty impartial about the Dodgers this whole episode, kind of giving the Padres some chances there. But I'm going with the Dodgers here. The playoff experience, and maybe that's not a valid argument considering what the Phillies did last year. But I think the Dodgers would win this one. I think when they're clicking, which hopefully that by this point they are, it really comes. There's so much question marks when it comes to the Dodgers in the postseason. But that's what I'm going with. I'm going with the Dodgers to face the Braves again in the NLCS.
I don't think that's too bold. I'm going with the Dodgers as well. I do think that they beat the Phillies, and I think that their lineup, because it's a little bit more down to earth this year, I think they're going to hit better in the playoffs than they have in past years, and that's kind of been their bugaboo, why they haven't been able to move on. So I've got the Dodgers beating the Phillies. I don't think the Phillies go on quite the same run that they did last year. And then Braves Mets, I've got the Braves being upset again after getting a high seed. I have the Mets beating the Braves, and last year I had the Mets winning the division, but the Braves going further in the playoffs. And this year I've got the Braves winning the division, but the Mets going further in the playoffs. I don't know what it is, but I just couldn't shake, my want to put the Mets over the Braves. I originally wanted to have them winning the division, but the circumstances, I just couldn't do it. And I think that they go further in the playoffs. I just like them a little bit more. So I actually had two, I don't have 1 versus 2 in the championship for the National League. That means my National League championship would be the 2 seed versus the 4 seed Dodgers and Mets. But I'm going chalk through the American League because that's always how it works for the most part. I've got the Astros beating the Blue Jays, the 1 seed beating the 4 seed. You guys know I think the Astros are. I'm not going to spoil where I have them going, but I do think that the Astros are the best team in the American League, and with the rest, I think it'll really help them. And then the Yankees beating the Twins. This is where the Twins run ends for me. So I've got 1 versus 2 in the American League Championship, which is going to be another Astros-Yankees one, and then 2 versus 4 Dodgers and Mets in the National League Championship.
Yeah, the way this shakes out, I've got the Astros versus the Yankees playing in the division series, and I'm not picking against the Astros. It's going to be the Astros continuing to beat up on the Yankees. Maybe it'll take them 4 games in a 5-game series instead of 4 games in a 7-game series. I don't know if it'll be a sweep this time with how these rosters are constructed, but still Astros winning and moving on to the championship series. Then you got Blue Jays versus Angels. It's going to be chalk for me. The Angels aren't going to be quite what the Phillies were in their playoff run. They win a series, but the Blue Jays are going to beat them. And I guess now that you mentioned it, I hadn't noticed up to this point, but I guess I have 1 versus 2 in both the American League and the National League, so maybe I'm no fun zone. But hey, at least the Phillies and Angels, I've got both 6 seeds upsetting them to get there.
Yeah, no, I think I'd never like seeing 1 versus 2 and 1 versus 2. I always feel like that's just a bad omen that it's going to not work out. So going with the Mets to beat the Braves. They're the team that I've got, upsetting the chalk. But in the championship, it's Astros versus Yankees. It's Dodgers versus Mets. I'll start with the Astros and Yankees because we've talked about it all the time. The Astros just don't lose to New York in the playoffs. I have them advancing to the World Series. Don't think that should come as a surprise to anyone. I believe I said in the Astros preview, I think they're going right back to the World Series. So I've got the Astros moving on. And then Dodgers and Mets, which I think is going to be a really fun series. I have it as a 7-gamer. I think the Dodgers are going to hit better than they have in recent years in the playoffs, like I've mentioned all offseason. I think the Mets lineup is great. I love the way that the roster is constructed top to bottom. Ended up going with the Mets to go to the World Series because I think. What did you think I was going to pick the Dodgers? What are you doing? I actually picked the Dodgers to win.
You started giving me some hope.
I started to pick I picked the Dodgers to win the World Series last year, and that was the last time I'm going to do that because it's not fun for me, and if they're not going to do it, then I'm not going to pick them. But I think the Mets roster is just better top to bottom than the Dodgers is, while having a similar level of high highs. So I think the Dodgers will band together a little bit more in the postseason than they have in recent years, and they lose it in a Game 7. But I've got the Mets moving on, so my World Series will be Astros versus Mets.
And this is one. I mean, Jack knows where I'm going with this because I've been sticking with it throughout our season previews. I've got the Blue Jays beating the Astros. I get that's where I get no chalk. It's kind of just a feeling. I think it's so hard to repeat. And I know this wouldn't necessarily. It's not like a World Series, but it's so hard to repeat in baseball. I would say maybe the hardest sport to go back to back in. That's an argument for a different day. But I know we've seen the Astros go back to the World Series a couple times in a row, and they haven't gone back to back, but I think they fall short here. Blue Jays just kind of find their groove in this series and move on to the World Series. Face one of the Dodgers versus Braves. And, funny thing, my friend who is a Braves fan, I was talking to him before last postseason, so he was like, who are you picking to win the World Series? I was like, Dodgers, like when we were going into it, like who else would I pick? He's like, oh, I can't pick the Braves. It's a bad juju. Like I've never picked the Braves. Or he said I used to always pick the Braves, and then 2021 I didn't, and they won it all. So I was like, oh, I've never thought of that. So maybe I've been chasing the Dodgers this whole time. So the Braves win that series. They're gonna go play the Blue Jays in the World Series, and maybe that's it is. I do believe in the Braves. They're the 1 seed. I move on to this point in the season, but it's also a little bit for personal gain. Maybe I'm not going to jinx them this year. Dodgers, that is.
Aaron, I should have done it. I think it's because I picked them to win last year is the reason they didn't. But anyways, my World Series is Astros and Mets. This one I think would be really exciting, and I've rode the Mets the whole way and had them going farther than I think a lot of people will after this Edwin Diaz injury. I feel like the Mets are no longer a trendy pick. If they had Correa, I think that a lot of people would be on him this year, but I still really like the way this Mets roster is laid out. That being said, I'm going with the Astros to win their second straight World Series and repeat as World Series champions for the first time in a very, very long time in the MLB. I just think it's going to be the battle of attrition, to be honest. The Mets have a very hard path to get through the National League. To go through it, they had to beat the Padres in the wild card. They had to beat the Braves in the divisional and the Dodgers in the championship series, whereas the Astros had a bye and then played the Blue Jays and the Yankees, two teams that they've played very well against, especially the Yankees in the championship. So I think they're going to have the rest advantage. I think that they are going to, while the Mets will be battle tested, I think the Astros will just, since they have an easier path to the World Series with the 1 seed as well as with the teams they have to play, I think that they win it. And they've just got more experience in the World Series as well. I really like the Astros this year, and it's not a fun pick, but I'm going with the Astros to repeat.
Not a fun pick at all. So I get a different World Series matchups. It's the Braves versus the Blue Jays. And I think in this scenario, I'd go Braves in 6. I'm going with the Braves to get their second title in 3 years in this one. They've improved so much with trades in the last couple of years and then developing some of the young players. They'll get Acuna, which they didn't have for 2021 for that playoff run. I just think they're such a different team from when they won it 2 years ago. And I think for the better, with Strider in the rotation as well. I think they're better than the Blue Jays are, and with the more experience, maybe the Blue Jays are this year's White Sox for me. I had the White Sox losing the World Series last year and winning their division. So,
or the Blue Jays are this year's the Blue Jays are this year's Blue Jays for you. Didn't you have? I mean, you had a win in the division last year, going pretty far in the playoffs.
I did, but I had the White Sox winning 100 games last year and going to the World Series. So yeah. I've got the Blue Jays going to the World Series, coming up short to the Braves, but I guess that ended up being fun. It looked like we were kind of headed on similar trajectories there for playoff matchups, but we defer a little bit there. I've got the Braves winning it all. You've got the Astros running it back. So we've got the last 2 World Championships. One of them's going to win in our minds. So I guess that's all we got.
All right, as we did kind of last year, and a question that I definitely think is worth asking after seeing the Phillies run last year, give me one team for you that didn't make the playoffs that you think is most likely to go on a run in the playoffs. Like maybe all the way to the World Series, maybe not, but like one team that didn't make it for you that you think has the best shot of going on a run.
That didn't make it. You're going to make me do it. I guess with the way this worked out, the team that I can most see making a run is the White Sox. I think there's a lot of promise in the top of that rotation, which is so important in a playoff series, with Cease, who is a Cy Young candidate, Lance Lynn, who is good down the stretch. Giolito hasn't been good since the sticky stuff ban, but if he can be decent, that's great 1, 2, 3. Their lineup's got a lot of exciting potential. So of the teams that I left out of the playoffs, I think the White Sox are the most likely to kind of sneak in there and give teams a run for their money in some short series. I think I originally had the White Sox in over the Angels, and I also had the White Sox winning that wild card series. So you get into a divisional series, I think they can turn that around in a 5-game series as well, and then get to the championship series. Anything can happen in the playoffs. So I think the White Sox are the most likely team that I left out in any of these, or in either league that I think can make a run.
I will go with the Giants, the National League, just because they're the only team that I had above 500 that didn't make the playoffs. And I mean, we saw that their roster, if it hits, is constructed to a point where they can win a lot of games. I do think they were going to win any playoff series. They were going to win playoff series against anyone but the Dodgers in 2021, and that was just, it was so tight. So I think that they've got a chance if they sneak in. And I mean, I'd probably go with either the Angels or the Rangers in the American League, just because with the Angels, I mean, you get Trout and Ohtani in a playoff game, and who knows what can happen. And the Rangers, you got DeGrom at the front of a 3-game series. He could win you one, and all you need is one other pitcher of the guys that they've brought in with a lot of potential to hit. And I really like their lineup as well. And Corey Seager hits in the playoffs like just on that same level that Carlos Correa does, where he comes through. So I think I would go either Angels or Rangers. But I think that's all we've got, and it's bold. You know, last year I think we both had the White Sox in the World Series. Did you have White Sox Dodgers? I had White Sox Giants, and boy, that was bad. But it wasn't good on either end for us, and hopefully we come out a little bit better this year. I had Astros versus Mets. Ryan had Blue Jays versus Braves, and we want to know who you guys have down below. So let us know who you guys have in the World Series, winning the World Series. Did you disagree with us on all the divisions? Did you agree with us on some? Let us know whatever you want to let us know down in the comment section, and we're going to respond to all of them as we approach opening day. But anyways, that is what Ryan and I have for season predictions. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you come back tomorrow for our awards predictions. If you're watching this closer to opening day, they're probably already out, so those are coming out on Wednesday. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. We've been Double Play Baseball, and we'll see you next time.